Hello, welcome. Holism evolution assumes that the current stage of evolution is the human being, what Smuts calls the personality, that I call the growing self. And through the Holism evolution graph, which if you haven't seen the videos on them from my Holism YouTube site, please go and have a look. It will be most helpful for this video. But the assumption is that this growing self that we are is preparing, and the religions have been preparing us for thousands of years already, that we will evolve to allow for the next stage of manifestation in evolution, in holistic evolution to happen, that of the spirit self, that the religions call things like being reborn or enlightened or Atman or paradise and so on. So this video is about some of the insights that we can get towards where we can, or how we can use science education to really foster that evolution. And in fact, it's already there. It's literally a matter, I think, of tweaking it. So there are two parts. This part, I'm going to go through the spiritual encounters. And the next part, I'll do the association with science education. If you're not interested in the spiritual encounters, you can just flick straight to the next video. But from a logical perspective, it's important, I think, that we get this sense first of how do we get certain perceptions, certainly the perceptions of the spiritual. But the next video will go through those two. So this is an autoethnographic version. In other words, I'm going to share some stories from my life, but I'm also going to go through some of the common or known ways in which we, or human beings, humanity, gets experiences, to have encounters with the spiritual. So that's near-death experiences, people who speak to nature spirits, animals, reincarnation, folks who claim to be enlightened, and so on. So different kinds of spiritual experiences that are claimed. All religions claim that there is a God. Well, Buddhism says, or the Buddha says that we have to do the work, do the exercises, and then we will know. He didn't declare there was a God, but there is a spiritual world, a world of beings without physical bodies. Indigenous knowledge does the same, although the kinds of beings are quite different in the one to the other form, which is why many indigenous cultures really fell for the great religions when they came their way, of the massivity and universality of the beings that the great religions proclaimed relative to the indigenous knowledge beings. People who have near-death experiences also claim to have experiences of a spiritual nature, of blessedness. You can see I've repeated the word in the beginning and the end, and a variety of other experiences. Reincarnation is another form of this. Young children, not generally people who do recall previous lives, it's generally young children who will do that. And there's an enormous body of research that's been done by Jay Tucker in the United States and his team. So if you're interested, go and have a look. But of course, in the West, it's an unusual thought, which is why we need the research. In the East, it's a common belief structure. There are people who claim to speak to animals and nature spirits, i.e. the beings that we hear of in fairy tales and indigenous knowledge. Of those, Anna Breitenbach, the first name there, is the one that I've done the most research in. She has a very scientific approach, and if you're interested to test out the validity of this, all of these are subjective experiences. Of course, if you are biased in that way and believe there is no such thing, well, stop thinking now, because you're busy with a subjective experience. But of course, we have to imagine that there is a world beyond what we can normally perceive. And that's what all of these different types of perceptions claim. And then there are folk who claim to be enlightened, well, reborn in a sense that they have conscious spiritual communion. I use that from a Christian perspective. Sadhguru, Eckhart Tolle are still alive, and there are many others. Rudolf Steiner passed away about 100 odd years ago. And there are many others. So from my own personal background, I have had several fairly powerful life-transforming experiences, and I'm going to share three with you so that you just get a bit of a sense of, from my perspective, what are some of the key factors that lead to the perception of spiritual nature. Now, obviously, if you're religious, you will have your own background insights as to how that happens. But from a scientific or research perspective, I would recommend beyond what I'm about to share, look at Sadhguru's TED talk on how he became enlightened. And you'll see a number of really key points that he goes through, and that makes me certainly convinced, because they correspond fairly strongly with my own experience. So my first major experience was where I sensed the presence of like a golden light around everything in nature that I was perceiving, and it just felt filled with love. So I was wrestling. This was my second year in undergrad, studying science. I had encountered this number E in both physics, all three, physics, chemistry, and mathematics, all at the same time. I was very depressed anyway, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was just carrying on with schoolwork, and I hadn't explored myself at all. So I was pretty depressed. And then this number E comes up, this number of perfection. And if you look at the graph on the right-hand side, where all those lines kind of join together on the right there, the Y value, the vertical value, is 3. The gradient of that graph at that point will be 3. The area under the curve indicated will also be 3. And I could have picked any point in the graph, and that number would be the same. Yeah, if I picked the line of 4, the gradient would be 4, the area would be 4, and so on. And also, it represents 100% growth 100% of the time. So there is an element of perfection in this number. And I was quite moved by that. I was, especially through the fact that it's studied in science and the maths, there is this quality of perfection, but still the sense of love wasn't there. But I had, and so I wrestled deeply, and I was most concerned with this question of, is there a God? And through conversation with a friend of mine, and then I had this awakening, you can read it in my thesis, where I really felt this presence. That was a powerful moment for me. And what was required was, number one, for me, what I reflected on is a deep earnestness of seeking, and a complete openness to what might emerge. So a kind of a selflessness, despite an incredible focus and presence, and a mathematical, rational, reasoned approach, and then opening into the emotional realm, and then this perception. And it was connected also to nature, because I was looking at nature and had a deep compassion and concern of the way we're just destroying nature, and how she just stands there all the time and never accuses us. And that thought just was the explosion that connected everything together, and then I had that perception. So that was the first big experience that I had. Another big experience that I had, this much more powerful, was feeling myself as a flame being. So I was on pass from the army in South Africa. All white men under apartheid had to go to the military, and I was now on pass. So I felt really powerfully relieved of this pressure and stress of being in the military environment. And I was going to go out, and I was going to, well, to be frank, I was going to have sexual intimacy with a woman that I knew. She wasn't my girlfriend, but we were close. And I certainly liked her a great deal. And I stepped out the train, and I was walking down the road, and called her to mind. And this fullness of desire, you can say, really filled me up. And then I remembered how the last time we had met, she had not been a happy person at all. And she'd been wrestling and really trying her hardest to be happy, but there was just something stopping. And in that moment, a complete transformation of my feelings took place. That incredible presence and empowered feeling that I had was still there, but now it all shifted from a sense of a desire to a sense of complete compassion and care. And in that moment, I lost my ability to see in the environment. I just felt myself to be this glowing flame. I became enormous, as the picture on the side shows. The blue part's my physical body. The yellow is me as flame. And I was suddenly surrounded by similar flames, which are depicted in red. I drew this not so long after I had the experience. And it was the most blissful experience I've ever had. It was quite extraordinary. And again, what were the keys that gave rise to this experience? It was very much an empowered, feeling rich thing, and a release from any self wish, for my own desires to be fulfilled, or anything of that sort. Of complete engagement or release from self, into a genuine care and interest and wish for another, similar to what I had with nature in the previous experience. And the final one I want to share with you is what I call seeing the music dragon. And seeing the music dragon was a very different kind of experience. The dragon that I perceived does not look anything like the one in the picture. It looks more like the one on the New Zealand stamp that I showed you in a previous slide. A shorter, stockier head, bigger teeth, and ferocious anyway. And while I was at a concert that my wife was performing in, she was playing on piano with a violinist. She had asked me just to listen to the balance of sound and to see if the audience were engaging. And, you know, when they'd come to the end of the piece, I would give her a thumbs up or something so that she could know if there was any adjustments they were needing. Anyway, I had forgotten all of that, and I was absolutely immersed in this extraordinary music, taken out of myself, emotionally really lifted into a very blissful state at the extraordinary music. And then I remembered, oh, I've got to watch all these things. So without leaving that emotional state, I looked at the musicians, I listened more carefully, I awakened, in other words, a kind of a observing objectiveness in the way I was approaching what was happening, but I still allowed that full emotional experience. And everything seemed fine. And then I looked at the audience and I lived right into the experiences. I could see some of the audience members, how they were sort of moving a bit, and I really felt their engagement, and something of me again moved out towards them. And in that moment, subliminally up on the side, I saw this very thick, enormous, scaly, ferocious looking dragon or serpent. In New Zealand, they call them tanifas. And that's what I believe I saw. That was there because of the presence of the music and the presence of what was happening. So again, there was a really powerful experience. And again, you can hear what I think were the keys to my perceptions of these spiritual phenomena. So that's all I want to share with you in this video. In the next video, we're going to go into the Holism evolution graph. If you haven't seen the videos on it, please go and have a look, because I'm going to go through these, and I'm going to, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you again, because, oh, sorry, I'm going to just show you the places where we get experience. So naturally, we get experience through the body, our sexual impulses, hunger and need for sleep, and so on. They well up from the body, but we also get senses from the outer world, experiences, and that comes through our senses. Then in science and as a human being, we need to begin to be objective, and the reasoning faculty is what enables us to do this, to build our reality with W, which is our internal construct of reality, which includes our internal sense of self. And then to move into the spirit region to get a sense for that spiritual world, I've termed that getting some form of empowered selflessness to awaken perceptions of a spiritual sort. So that's the next video. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join us for the next to see, okay, what are the impacts, potential for how science education can move to encourage or enable these perceptions to take place.